The real eye-opener, though, is that the Green Party of Canada is a cesspool for anti-Semites. And it was proven this weekend when the party voted to support the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement at their convention in Ottawa.
The current problems of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party are just an eruption of something that everybody has known has been there for a long time.
But if the only nation they attack as apartheid is the non-apartheid nation of Israel, then they're Jew haters. They're racists.
A student union meeting in Toronto showcased how the anti-Israel students at Ryerson University, more often than not, are nothing more than a bunch of Jew haters.
Mafor is a hero. He's also an anti-Semite.
Now, for many on the political left, BDS has been a mainstay in their opposition to the democracy of Israel. It's no secret that the more extreme wings of both the NDP and Liberal Party have sympathy for this movement and varying degrees of anti-Semitism.
Well, that's just one step away from the Holocaust.
It was revealed just last month that Monica Schaefer, former federal Green Party candidate for the riding of West Yellowhead in Alberta, is a Holocaust denier and a 9/11 truther. Here she is actually apologizing to her parents and denying that there were gas chambers and mass deaths.
The Labour Party itself is now led by a man, Jeremy Corbyn, who has spent most of his political life being very cosy with some of the world's most notorious anti-Semites, some of the world's most notorious Holocaust deniers.
Isn't it sad to realize that the Jew-hating Israel Apartheid Week started right here in Canada? And that in the name of free speech, Jew-hating is an annual event on Canadian campuses?
The anti-Semitic boycott and divestment movement, known as BDS, and many on the anti-Semitic left, have been leading the charge of apartheid against the State of Israel.
Well, it was a vote on whether or not the student union should help facilitate a Holocaust Education Week. That motion, which couldn't be more tame or reasonable, is what brought out the Jew hatred on campus.
You will never find a regime that is sufficiently evil that doesn't pick up a tinge of anti-Semitism, just as you never find anti-Semitism that has any real strength that doesn't become extremely evil in other ways too. Believe it or not, Imperial Japan in the run-up to World War II had anti-Semitic laws.
But they keep on saying, but we are not anti-Semites. And you know, there are so many Jews among us, which is right. I mean, there are many Jews. Now, Jews can allow themselves to be politically correct anti-Semites.
At the announcement of a German-funded program, they stood by a map that showed Palestine, but no Israel. They deny the existence of Israel. They call for the killings of Jews. They celebrate stabbings. They are accessories to the rocket attacks that happened all throughout 2014.
Even in the United States, anti-Semitism is being normalized in the Democratic Party on university campuses. So it should be a busy time for a group called the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, which is dedicated to fighting back against anti-Semitism.
The vote to support BDS this past weekend just goes to show that the Green Party is full of terrorist sympathizers that don't like Israel or Jews.
What the source of their anti-Semitism problem is, and the problem is that it comes not only from the grassroots but from the top, and the top of the Labour Party, as it currently stands, has been pushing this poison into the body politic in Britain for years.
The only reason to oppose holding a Holocaust Education Week is if you're a Holocaust denier or just a Jew hater, and that's my point. The anti-Israel students at Ryerson are often faced with the question of, are you Jew haters? And they answer by saying, no, we just don't like Zionism.
Anti-Semitism has a persistence and a virulence and a self-destructive quality that is absent even from other loathsome forms of bigotry.
Will it still be legal to call someone anti-Semitic in Canada?
Described as the new face of anti-Semitism. It stands for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel and was developed to target Israeli products, companies, and corporations.
And in light of the increasing amounts of anti-Semitic incidents in Canada, it would be worthwhile for Ryerson to have a Holocaust Education Week. It all reminds me of when I was on campus and the debates I would have with the anti-Israel students. I used to love asking people why it was that all three major political party leaders in Canada were not simply supporters of Israel, but self-described Zionists. And the answer I always got was either, well, it's because the Jews control the media, or because the Jews control the politicians. That's when the Jew hatred comes up. But when you get into Jewish conspiracy theories, like the Holocaust didn't happen, or the Jews are secretly controlling everything behind the scenes, that's when you lose legitimacy. Zionism has nothing to do with racism, but organizing against a Holocaust Education Week, that makes you a bigot.
But when we look, we do see, for instance, the prevalence of bigotry. Not only was Mothor an anti-Semite.
Jeremy Corbyn, the UK Labour leader, is investigating anti-Semitism in his party. There he is, standing next to the flag of an anti-Semitic terrorist group called Hezbollah. As you can see, the Hezbollah flag literally has a picture of a machine gun on it, as in that's what they want to do to Jews. Corbyn's standing right next to it, but he's hunting high and low for anti-Semites, demanding sanctions against Israel. Sanctions. In 2013, Corbyn demanded that the UK, quote, at the very least, stop allowing Israel's criminal politicians to come to our country freely. Can you believe it? But he wants to boycott the Jewish state. Yeah, he's definitely the right man for the job of hunting down Jew haters. Here's what this little bigot wrote about that. He called this family march, quote, a show of solidarity for a foreign state currently in the midst of an unresolved conflict, a country that is conducting a brutal and the longest contemporary military occupation in the world. So he wanted Toronto officials like the police chief to boycott the Jewish march. What a little anti-Semite. There aren't a lot of KKK activists on university campuses these days, but there are a lot of pro-Hamas activists on campus, demonizing Israel and Jews, denying the last Holocaust, even while calling for the next one.
You have called out Iran for anti-Semitism, for Holocaust denial, for calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Barack Obama said, well, the fact that you are anti-Semitic or racist doesn't preclude you from being interested in survival. It doesn't preclude you from being rational about the need to keep your economy afloat. It doesn't preclude you from making strategic decisions about how you stay in power. And so the fact that the Supreme Leader is anti-Semitic doesn't mean that this overrides all of his other considerations. You know, if you look at the history of anti-Semitism, Jeff, there were a whole lot of European leaders. There were deep strains of anti-Semitism in this country. So Barack Obama acknowledges that Iran is an anti-Semitic country, and he says, but they'll be rational. I mean, European anti-Semitism, that was restrained by rational thinking. European anti-Semitism, Adolf Hitler, the Nazis. Rational thinking didn't stop their anti-Semitic war or the Holocaust, but Barack Obama thinks it'll stop the next one. Now, that whole don't buy from Jews thing was a Nazi invention. You may know that in the 1930s, Nazis would literally stand out front of Jewish-owned shops with signs saying, this store is owned by Jews, don't buy from Jews, Jews are dirty rats, etc. That was discredited for a while after the Holocaust, but it's back in a big way. Even in Canada, in universities and churches, they have a new Don't Buy From Jews campaign. They call it boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It's just as gross and just as anti-Semitic. That these hateful anti-Semites will be given a taste of the medicine of the criminal code, and a throwaway line from the Minister of Public Safety saying that they will use every tool in their toolbox, including hate speech laws.
Do you want to fight against real anti-Semitism? Click here to help us fight against BDS. That's boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel.
Right. So Ezra has been one of the biggest kind of right-wing figures in Canada. I mean, he's friends with Ann Coulter. And throughout his life, he has been fighting from the conservative side of things, especially for free speech in Canada. I can't even remember how many times he's been dragged in front of courts, judges, Human Rights Committee, purely for his criticisms of Islam and criticisms of leftists in Canada. So he's been an amazing, amazing fighter for free speech here in Canada.
Ezra Levant, a fighter for free speech? Clearly, Lauren Southern is full of shit. No, she does not work for Rebel Media anymore, but she has still controlled opposition. We're also going to get into the other charlatans on the right. But first, let's start off with a very important question we all want to figure out. who screwed Western civilization.
You know, like any good director asks, Lauren, what's your motivation for the book? What drove it?
A lot of it was just an absolute frustration and sympathy for my generation and what's been done to them. I'm very angry with what's been done to them and how just absolutely lost and clawing in the dark everyone my age is. And I wanted to kind of write a manifesto for them on how we can fix this situation. It's more optimistic than pessimistic, but I think every chapter in the book is how this group ruined everything. So it seems pessimistic, but does have a good end.
Are the migrants, a lot of which are Muslim, ruining Western civilization? Yeah, no doubt. But it's time to start talking about who's bringing them here. Whose brilliant idea was it to destabilize their countries one after another?
In 1996, a group of neocons wrote a report intended as advice for incoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It called for a clean break with the peace process, rolling back Syria and removing Saddam Hussein from power, an important Israeli strategic objective in its own right. Amongst those who contributed, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, now number 3 at the Pentagon, David Wurmser, now in the State Department, and Mehrav Wurmser.
Yes, many of us are Jewish. There's no need to apologize for that. Most of us, all of us, in fact, are pro-Israel. Some of us more fiercely so than others.
Well, that paper in 1996, the Clean Break paper, that was the paper that led to accusations of dual loyalty.
There is no dual loyalty.
I was sitting in a bar on Capitol Hill and I was told by a congressional staffer, careful how you use the word neoconservative. People might think you're being anti-Semitic. Can you just explain this for me?
I mean, it's no secret. The majority of neoconservatives have been and remain Jewish. That is a fact. They do not represent a majority of the American Jewish community.
But you think it's legitimate to talk about the pro-Israeli politics of some of the neoconservatives?
Well, I think it's very difficult to understand them if you don't begin at that point.
That brought us low economically, morally. We went to war against a guy who had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. It was a total pretext. It's inexplicable. And there you go to Cheney, there you go to Bush, there you go to the Jewish neocons who wanted to remake the world. Maybe I can say that because I'm Jewish, and to bring about a certain result
I'm not really
in the
sure
Middle
that
East.
You can.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure that you can.
Go ahead.
You've expressed some concern over the idea that this is all a conspiracy whipped up by a group of, quotes, neoconservative hawks who are somehow allied to Israel, and you've expressed worries about that. Explain what you're concerned about.
Look, sometimes the word neoconservative is used when what they really would like to say is Jew.
They being?
People who use that kind of language. And as a Jew, I find it offensive.
You know, I'm appalled that when I talk about the neoconservatives, somehow it's twisted to be some sort of a racist comment. This is documented fact. The neoconservative role in the taking down of Iraq, unnecessary war, is fact. It's not opinion. I'm dealing with whore here who sells his soul to AIPAC, who will say anything for the job. Ignorant. His response to what I said was just shocking. I'm speaking documented fact, and I think a zealot.
Go ask a Jordanian, who was responsible for 9/11, 9/11, right? They'll tell you Saudi Arabia. And they told me that they feel very bad for Americans that we don't realize that Saudi Arabia is terrorizing America, and they hate the Saudis. The Saudis own the CIA. So the CIA works for the Saudi Arabian government. The CIA as it exists now is completely owned by Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis own the CIA, and They are trying to influence our elections, influence our policy. The Saudis are funding terrorism. This is why I get annoyed at the Jew hate. The Jew hate. It isn't because I care if anybody hates an ethnic group. It's not that it's just that it's uninformed.
Most of the neoconservatives who control US foreign policy in the Middle East are in fact Jewish. This is even admitted in mainstream Israeli news. They officially planned these wars for the security of the Jewish state of Israel. Yet Israel won't take in any refugees. Most of them go to Europe.
Basically, the US is providing these flows for us. You make war and we get the refugees.
Israel has actually built a wall. Trump announces his plan to build a wall, and we hear about white supremacy in the media over and over again, but not a word about Jewish supremacy.
Neo-Nazi movement National Action is to become the first extreme right-wing group banned as a terrorist organization.
They will talk about the Jewish conspiracy to take over the European Union and the world. And this is something which people have complained about.
An Arab man is to appeal his conviction of rape by deception in Israel after having consensual sex with a woman who thought he was a fellow Jew. Sabar Kishore, who denies pretending to be Jewish, was sentenced to 18 months in jail. But as RT's Paulus Leo reports, even couples who knowingly choose to enter into an interfaith relationship are ostracized.
Vigilante-style Jewish patrol groups, calling themselves Fire for Judaism, stand watch outside the local shopping mall. Their mission? To prevent Arab men mixing with local Jewish girls. The municipality has created a 24-hour hotline where parents and friends can phone to rat on Jewish girls breaking this taboo. A specially trained team of counselors and psychologists is on standby to rescue them.
It's important to safeguard our traditions, culture, history and identity, because without this, who are we?
There are Jewish gangs which are against any relations between Jewish girls and non-Jewish men. And they keep hunting Jewish girls, even those who can go out to a pub or to a restaurant or anywhere with an Arab guys, and threaten them and force them to break their relations with Arab guys.
He's Muslim, she's Jewish. But they're now thinking about leaving Israel because they say it's simply too difficult on other levels.
When my family found out, they were very adamant about cutting me off on every level for acting as a traitor.
National Action was classed as a terrorist organization and banned in the UK for protesting immigration policies. Meanwhile, Israel has companies operating that hire vigilantes to assault people for interracial dating. And Israel is celebrated by Theresa May as a thriving democracy, a great example of Jewish privilege. In the Jewish state of Israel, it's illegal for a Jew to marry a non-Jew. That is because in Judaism, marrying a Gentile is like marrying an animal. Mishnah Torah, Sefer Kedusha, Isserei Biyah, chapter 12, section 10. If, by contrast, a Jewish male enters into relations with a Gentile woman, when he does so intentionally, she should be executed. She is executed because she caused a Jew to be involved in an unseemly transgression, as is the law with regard to an animal. This applies regardless of whether the Gentile woman was a minor of 3 years of age. She is executed. If a Jewish man does not marry a Jewish woman, their child is not considered Jewish.
Do you think that somebody whose father is Jewish, but mother is not Jewish, can still consider himself Jewish?
No.
So you go by halakha?
Yes.
Okay, why?
Because the mother is not Jewish.
Okay. But if he considers himself Jewish still?
I don't think so.
Okay. מה דעתך על יהודים שהאימא שלהם לא יהודייה, אבל האבא שלהם יהודי? אז הם נחשבים יהודים או לא?
ממש לא.
ממש לא? Do you think that someone whose mother is not Jewish and father is Jewish is Jewish?
A Jew and a non-Jew are not even supposed to eat at the same table.
But can you see it from their perspective, if some of them have lived here for generations, how they might feel like this land belongs to them?
I don't care. I mean, according to the Torah, this is Eretz Israel. It belongs to us.
I mean, you don't think there's any way that Arabs and Jews can live here in peace?
No. They don't have the right to stay here. גוי ויהודי אסור להם לאכול אפילו על אותו שולחן. אנחנו לומדים ככה מהתרבות הרעה שלהם It's all according to him. I don't care anything else. This is all.
You don't care about laws, you don't care about like human rights or any of that, it's all according to the Torah.
The Torah has also human rights. Mm-hmm. The real human rights. You know, in the end, after we build our big Beit Mikdash, המטרה הגדולה היא להיות אור לגויים.
They've had us focusing on Hitler and white supremacy growing up in school, yet they are doing exactly what they accuse Hitler of. This is Jewish supremacy. They literally believe that they are the master race and we have to work for them.
אז כן, מה כתוב? זה מה שאני לא מבין.
כתוב שאתם קרויים אדם והגויים לא קרויים אדם, זה מה שכתוב.
לא קרויים?
לא קרויים אדם, לא קוראים להם אדם.
אוקיי, אז מה קוראים להם?
אדם זה הדמל העליון. אדם הוא בן אדם שהוא שונה מהבהמה.
אדם זה הדמל העליון, מכיוון שאנחנו בנים של אלוקים, אז הוא קרא לנו בני אדם. עכשיו, הגויים מה שאין, כן? אלוקים עשה אותם בשביל שיעשו פה...
בשביל לשרת את היהודים. כל הגויים שאתה רואה שיש בעולם, המיליארדים האלה, הם הכל רק בשביל שהיהודים יהיה להם איזה תועלת.
עכשיו,
אנחנו לא רואים את זה, אנחנו לא יודעים בדיוק.
שנייה, כן, היות ואנחנו בגלות, אז אוטומטי עדיין הם עוד לא משרתים אותנו לגמרי, רק חלקית.
כל אחד יהיה לו, כשמשיח יבוא, אז כל אחד יהיה לו אלפים עבדים, 2,800 עבדים.
בינתיים, המשיח לא כאן, אז איך הם משרתים אותנו?
הם בונים לנו רכבים,
לא יודעים.
דירות, בניינים, חשמל, הם בונים את זה, לנו, משרתים את היהודים.
According to the ADL, it's hate speech to say that you love your race. However, it's not hate speech if you're Jewish. Once again, Jewish privilege.
Zionism is the Jewish liberation movement. Now, if you don't like nationalism, if you think nationalism is an abomination, if you think nationalism is racist, okay, then fine if you don't like Zionism. But you better not like Palestinian nationalism. You better not like French nationalism. If the only nationalism that bothers you or you find racist is Jewish nationalism, you're an anti-Semite.
This small group of people wants to dominate the world. How do they do that? They promote nationalism for themselves while promoting multiculturalism and breaking down nationalism for other races.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
למה זה מאיים שיהיו פה עוד מיליון אפריקאים?
זה מאיים כי לא תהיה פה מדינה יהודית. המדינה שלנו, תקשיב, המדינה שלנו שונה ממדינות אחרות. המדינה שלנו היא מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית. זה איזון מאוד מאוד לא פשוט, זה יכול להיות תרתי דסתרי במקומות מסוימים. זאת אומרת, דברים סותרים זה את זה במקומות מסוימים. במידה ותביא לפה מיליון אפריקאים, אז תחדל מלהיות יהודית. היא תחדל מלהיות יהודית.
Jews will often claim that they know what it's like to be immigrants. So you have to take in more immigrants, not Israel.
What's right now at the top of the agenda for you from within the JCPA?
There are two issues at the top of our agenda at the very moment. One is the unbelievably important immigration debate in this country, to make sure that immigrants from around the world, particularly those from south of our border, have a chance here. The 12 million or 13 million that just live here and do work and aren't really going home, that they have a chance to stay here justly and as legal immigrants. And that debate is so important because we know what it's like to come to another country, even one called the United States of America, where we weren't always so welcome.
Mr. Vice President, do you remember the time that we were the new kids in town?
Not only our Muslim communities, but African communities, Asian communities, Hispanic communities, and the wave still continues. It's not going to stop, nor should we want it to stop. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things I think we can be most proud of. So there's a second thing in that black box, an unrelenting stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who are Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America from then and on will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
In 2015, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel is determined to be a world power. That is what's happening today, just at everyone else's expense.
James Sears.
My name's James Sears. You already know who I am. Why are we murdering people in foreign countries, spending tens of millions of dollars a year, murdering their children in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Syria, instead of spending the money here in Canada? We have seniors and veterans sitting at home eating cat food on limited budgets. They can't afford to pay their rent. It's a choice between eating or paying their rent. The four major parties, at least the three of the four major parties, support Israel no matter what Israel does, no matter what atrocities they commit. The middle class would gladly pay taxes if they knew it was going to help poor people, not to murder people in foreign countries. I'm sick and tired of our money being used to advance the interests of the United States and Israel. I stand here as the only person who has the courage to speak out for our people, and I'm going to do it loudly and clearly tonight. I agree with the Marxist guy and the Green guy. We should stop murdering people in foreign countries. We're creating the refugees, and we're doing it to help Israel expand, and it's wrong. It's immoral. It's like I don't know what's happened to Canada. Like Canada used to be the peacemaker, right? And I think the Green and the Marxist guy will agree with me. Now we're just Israel and the United States. I don't know. Can I say bitch on TV? I don't know. But that's what we are. We do whatever they tell us, and we're murdering these people, and then we're told to bring them over here. It's wrong. Absolutely wrong.
So what happened about a couple of weeks ago, the minister, the federal minister in charge of Canada Post, a woman by the name of Judy Foote, F-O-O-T-E, I've nicknamed her Judge Judy. She's a member of Parliament for the Liberal Party. She did something illegal. She used an extremely rarely used law in the Canada Post Act, which says that she can declare a person without a trial, just on mere suspicion, to be such a dangerous person that they can't use the post office. So the way she stopped the delivery of this month's publication, which was supposed to go out a few days ago, is she had a letter sent to the post office declaring me a dangerous person, almost like a terrorist. And now I'm not allowed to use the postal service. I can't even mail out a Christmas card. I'm that dangerous.
Leader of the NCP, Dr. James Sears, who continuously speaks out against Zionism, was classed as a terrorist by the Liberal Party and is no longer allowed to use the post office.
The Liberal Party does not feel that support for Israel should be a Canadian political wedge issue. All political parties in this country are friends to Israel and should be.
As I've said many times before and after visiting Israel, standing up for Israel is more than just standing up for her security. It is also standing up for the very values and ideals that our two countries share: democracy, openness, tolerance, compassion, respect for the rule of law, and, perhaps above all, the quest for peace. In this regard, I want to reiterate that the Liberal Party of Canada will have Israel's back, not because it's in our political interests to do so at home, but because it is the right thing to do.
Unfortunately, we don't look at history. People don't read history. We just wait to suffer and then we make changes. So I think we actually will need to suffer more under Trudeau's cucked government in order to make the changes necessary to protect our country, protect our people, and to represent ourselves better, quite frankly, on a worldwide scale.
It doesn't take a genius to see who Trudeau cucks for. Lauren's former boss, Ezra Levant, even admitted that Jews have always been behind hate speech laws.
I know about this firsthand. In the 1960s and 70s, left-wing activists, Jews mainly as it so happens, pressed for so-called hate speech laws in Canada. They were all targeting a handful of neo-Nazi activists in Toronto. Neo-Nazi isn't even really the right word. They weren't violent like Nazis. They just didn't like Jews. But these activists didn't do anything criminal at all. They were just really, really irritating. So the Canadian Jewish Congress pressed the Liberal government to have hate speech laws enacted, and they were. And for years, those laws in Canada, such as Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, were used almost exclusively by the Jews against anti-Semitic losers. I say losers because calling them criminals isn't really accurate. And the Canadian Criminal Code was amended too, to add hate propaganda and promoting genocide to the Criminal Code too, all because some idiots kept irritating the Jewish community.
German lawyer Horst Mahler was sentenced to 10 years in prison for denying the Holocaust. We're all allowed to question history. However, that doesn't apply to Jewish history. You will go to prison for questioning Jewish history. Meanwhile, Israel refuses to recognize the Armenian genocide. Once again, Jewish privilege. In 2010, Israeli President Shimon Peres told Ukraine to forget Holodomor, where 7 million Ukrainians were starved to death by the Soviet Union. Abe Foxman of the ADL also told the Ukrainian government not to talk about their genocide.
The history of the Jewish people in this country is primarily one of tragedy. We would like to see a more active, a more aggressive approach to dealing with issues of anti-Semitism. It took a long...
Foxman is concerned about the Ukrainian government's comparison of the famine in the Ukraine before World War II with the Holocaust.
The one thing that you need to be sensitive about is not to link it with the Holocaust. Be careful that it not be played as your genocide, our genocide, because that will be counterproductive on all sides.
Listen closely to these two Jewish billionaires.
In this country, the one thing the Jews have been searching for 3,000 years is acceptance and assimilation. And now that we've achieved acceptance and assimilation, it's turning out to be our undoing. And without birthright, there are statistics that have been proven at least twice, once by Brandeis and once by Pew Research, that there's only 42% of Jewish kids between the age of 18 and 26 that say they'll marry within their religion and or bring their children up Jewish. Now, 42% is less than half the remaining. in another 2 or 3 generations, there won't be any more secular Jews left. Now think of that. For 3,000 years, we've been fighting for acceptance. Now we've been accepted. It's turning out to kill us. So this is the most important program of my lifetime.
Hang on a minute. Our population has increased by 2, 3, 4 million since the Eastern Bloc became free. How many more people can a small island take? That is the question on many people's lips.
Yes, but you also have a declining birth rate, and you need, for a flourishing economy, you need some growth. And it has to be replaced by migrants from outside.
Jewish billionaire Sheldon Adelson tells his people not to intermarry because their race will be killed off. Then, Jewish billionaire George Soros promotes mass immigration into Europe. His reason for doing so is because Europeans have low birth rates, so they must take in Africans and Arabs with higher birth rates and essentially be killed off.
Globalism means unending war in the Third World and unchecked immigration from the Third World, all sponsored by unelected governments with as much respect for the people they govern as those in the Third World.
Who wants unending war in the Third World?
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Over 10 million refugees created is definitely enormous positive reverberations on the region. Netanyahu creates all these refugees and doesn't take in any because Israel has to become a world power. Who cares what happens when most of them go to Europe? Better yet, he wants to destabilize Iran as well.
So how much enriched uranium do you need for a bomb? And how close is Iran to getting it? Well, let me show you. Brought a diagram for you. Here's a diagram.
You don't need to take my word for it. Just listen to this list of famous globalists. George Soros.
Is George Soros doing this because he works for a mysterious group of globalists? Or is Lawrence Southern detracting your attention away from who's actually trying to destroy Western civilization?
It's the end of days. You're going to need the iron of Esav, which represents Edom, which is the West, Europe, and the Americas, to get intermixed with Ishmael, which is basically Arabs and Muslims. How in the world was this ever going to happen if not for this refugee crisis? At the end of days, you're going to have this intermixing between Esav, Edom, which is the West, and the East, which is the Muslims and the Arabs, making this through this influx into the world. And they're going to have children, you know, I don't want to say by the dozens, but they're going to have a far larger birth rate than the indigenous people there, and they're going to sort of conquer by number. And there are many different sources for this. One of them in Yehezkel, chapter 14, and many other sources as far as this is concerned, where it's mentioned very, very vividly what will happen to the Jews and what will happen to Yerushalayim and what will happen to the world at that time, where there will be many, many people killed and so on and so forth. So the idea of having these refugees come into Europe, it's no longer a matter of whether it's right or wrong. It's just simply a fulfillment of what it was meant to be all along. This is the fulfillment of, you know, the Hazal and the prophecies. This has to happen, and this is just another sign that we are nearing, you know, the completion of this tikkun of the entire world.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. There can be no white race. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
I'm sure most of you have heard of the term white genocide. Well, that is the goal. They openly admit this. When you think of genocide, you generally think of it being something physical, like what's happening in the Middle East. But the end result for Europeans will be just as significant. The Zionists are using Western countries to bomb the hell out of the Middle East and Libya, then using those refugees to outbreed Europeans to make them a minority in their own continent. Killing two birds with one stone. Rabbis wrote a letter to Trump urging him to bomb Syria. Then rabbis signed a letter demanding that we take in the refugees, not Israel. People might try to say that the rabbis are doing this because they're humanitarians. Well, 50 Israeli rabbis signed an open letter warning Jews not to rent or sell property to non-Jews, saying that those who do should be ostracized. And they were even rewarded in Israel. This is Jewish supremacy. They want what's best for themselves and are destroying the lives of others in order to do so. If you think I'm over-exaggerating, let's take another look at white privilege versus Jewish privilege. A white couple was sentenced to 35 years in prison for yelling racial slurs at a child. Meanwhile, a rabbi was sentenced to 60 days in jail for sexually abusing 4 children. Another case of killing two birds with one stone. Neocon Bill Kristol wrote an article calling for Iraq to be bombed back to the Stone Age, and later publicly called for the white working class to be replaced.
Look, to be totally honest, if things are so bad as you say with the white working class, don't you want to get new Americans in who aren't going to be... I'm serious. You can make a case that this is going on too long and this is too crazy probably, and I hope this thing isn't being videotaped or ever shown anywhere. Whatever tiny pathetic future I have is going to be totally collapsed. You can make a case that America has been great because I think John Adams said this at the beginning, right? Basically, if you're in a free society, a capitalist thriving society, after 2, 3, 4 generations of hard work, everyone becomes kind of decadent, lazy, spoiled, whatever.
Bill Kristol wanted this because I guess trying to create a deep state coup against his own president wasn't exciting enough.
Lauren claims that Bill Kristol is working for a mysterious deep state. The Israeli news even admits that he's Jewish. Lauren's main focus is covering how Western civilization is being destroyed, but she refuses to talk about Jewish involvement.
So why is it that today, when Islamic preachers openly advocate for the destruction of Western civilization and support the murder of anyone who opposes them, that when people are marching in the streets asking for the beheading of Westerners, that when large numbers of Muslims in Europe are being open and honest about their extremism, why is it that today, society we just stick our head in the sand and we loudly scream that everything is completely fine? Is your guest spot at Slate really more important than the future of Western civilization? Hashtags are not going to stop those blind with hatred for the West. And liberals, the longer you keep quiet and sit and watch the maimed bodies of your fellow men and women being carried away, the more you make yourself complicit in the agenda of those who seek to tear our culture apart from the inside. These horrors are not going to be worlds away for long, and they are not going to be stories on the internet or videos on Twitter for long. This is going to become a reality for everyone if we do not solve this problem. And don't tell me I let hate win because I am angry with the senseless slaughter of innocent people. Hate won on the streets of London today when we did nothing to stop it.
Lauren claims liberals are complicit for the downfall of Western civilization because they are politically correct when it comes to Muslims. Meanwhile, she deliberately hides Jewish involvement and has worked for Zionist Jews. She is just as guilty as liberals, if not worse. And if you criticize her for this, I guarantee she will call you a Nazi.
I mean, a couple of months ago, I at least felt like a few of them were still sort of trying, but it's pretty clear that now they have totally left the reservation and resigned to calling everyone they disagree with a Nazi.
No offense, Nazis. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I don't like you. I like Jews.
Like other charlatans on the right, she fuels the fire while deliberately avoiding the root cause. This results in a clash of civilizations which only benefits one group of people, and those people happen to be her employers. They've successfully done this in America, pitting whites and blacks in an unwinnable race war while robbing the country blind.
Out of all the groups, the most important one by a mile was the English Defence League, British Freedom Party. That was a serious, systematic, hugely funded effort by a section of the ruling elite, by this Zionist neocon clique, to dominate, to simply take over nationalism and turn it into their tool to encourage the white working class to go and fight their wars, and so that when the banking collapse comes, people are looking in the wrong direction instead of the real culprits. This party, we were approached. I was approached. We were offered money from the United States, and all they wanted was two things. They only wanted us to concentrate on Islam, and I yield to no one in my criticism of Islam and grooming. I put my neck on the line. Many of you have put your neck on the line as well. But it's not the only problem. And they wanted us only to focus on that, and it only came with one other thing. They wanted us to drop our criticism of the banking system. Those were the only two things. We had to concentrate on talking about Muslims, and we had to drop our criticism of the international banking system. And I refused, and we refused. That was in about 2007. And all hell broke loose really from that time, when systematically they tried to take this party apart.
Nick Griffin, the former leader of the BNP, hates Islam. He was offered money to become a pro-Zionist white nationalist. They wanted him to focus on criticizing Islam and stop talking about the banking system. This is exactly what Lauren Southern and other popular figures on the right are doing, fueling the fire while avoiding the root cause.
To encourage the white working class to go and fight their wars, and so that when the banking collapse comes, people are looking in the wrong direction instead of the real culprits.
Именно после свержения Каддафи, при активном участии отдельных европейских стран, поток беженцев стал абсолютно бесконтрольным.
Слушайте, люди из НАТО, вы бомбите стену, которая не пропускала поток миграции в Европу. Стену, которая останавливала террористов Аль-Каиды. Этой стеной была Ливия. Вы разрушаете ее. Вы идиоты.
The Jewish media manipulated us into bombing Libya and opening the floodgates to Europe. They used the media to keep people as stupid as possible. Nick Griffin was labeled a neo-Nazi and later forced out of the BNP as the Zionists have always wanted. Honest people on the right are treated as terrorists and even sent to prison for thought crimes. The charlatans on the right will say anything they want about Muslims, but when it comes to the Jewish question, they'll do whatever they can to avoid it, claiming it's the globalists, it's the deep state, or even going as far as saying George Soros is white.
Why is Black Lives Matter funded by white billionaire elitists like George Soros?
If you thought it couldn't get any worse, Paul Joseph Watson even claims the mainstream media is owned by Democrats. The mainstream media is owned and controlled by Jews. That is a fact. They even brag about it.
England Rising in the UK says, what is your opinion on Jewish influence in the media? There it is.
There's the Jew question.
Yep, there it sits.
I don't people who are obsessed with Jews controlling the world never seem to present any evidence. I mean, I read the news every day. I track the narratives that the mainstream media comes out with. I don't see a big Jewish influence. I mean, Jewish people aren't really that present. You don't really notice them anywhere. I don't believe in this Jewish conspiracy because nobody presents any real credible hardcore evidence that it's taking place.
People say Jews are too powerful, we're too strong, we're too rich, we control the media, we have too much this, we have too much that. And we often apologetically
deny our strength and our power. Don't do that. Don't do that. We have earned the right to influence public debate. We have earned the right to be heard. We have contributed disproportionately to the success of this country. Never, ever apologize for using our strength and our influence in the interest of peace. And if you need a biblical source for it, just remember the psalmist who said, Hashem oz li'amo yitain. God will give the Jewish people strength, oz, and then, only then, Hashem yivarech et amo b'shalom, only then will God give the Jewish people peace. Peace will come for the Jewish people and the Jewish nation only through strength. Never apologize for using your strength.
Every mechanism of communication has been and will be used to promote anti-Semitism. It will also be used to promote philo-Semitism.
I notice you're wearing a shirt or a button that says "I'm a Zionist." What does a Zionist mean to you? What is a Zionist?
Well, a Zionist is someone who believes in a homeland for Jewish people.
I believe. My definition, when I've looked at that in the dictionary, is Israel first.
It means Israel first.
Yes.
Okay. Well.
Well, you know, there is a negative incantation in a lot of realms about Zionism, about, you know, international banking, about a lot of things like that. And since it does denote that it is Israel first, can you possibly serve two masters? Meaning, can you serve England and Israel at the same time?
There is no dual loyalty.
There are people who will say that Israel is good because they're killing Muslims. Where has bombing Muslim countries for Israel gotten the United States? Where has bombing Muslim countries for Israel gotten Europe? This is exactly what they want. You need to understand that you are Goyim. You are an animal to them. In 2010, former Chief Sephardic Rabbi Ovadia Yosef publicly said that non-Jews exist to serve Jews. Goyim were born only to serve us. Without that, they have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel. Why are Gentiles needed? They will work, they will plow, they will reap, we will sit like an effendi and eat. He goes on to compare you to a donkey. With Gentiles, it will be like any person. They need to die, but God will give them longevity. Why? Imagine that one's donkey would die. They'd lose their money. This is his servant. That's why he gets a long life, to work well for this Jew.
With the Sanhedria Cemetery, where these moments, Rav Ovadia Yosef, one of the greatest rabbis of the state of Israel, is being buried. He passed away this afternoon at the age of 93. About 700,000 people, an eighth of the population of Israel, have swarmed into Jerusalem in order to participate in the mourning of this great rabbi.
Hundreds of thousands of mourners have attended the funeral proceedings of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in Jerusalem. There was no Israeli leader from all walks of life who did not feel the urge to offer his official condolences as well as attend the funeral proceedings as if the rabbi was a state's official. Within hours, almost an eighth of the population of the Jewish state has traveled to Jerusalem to say their final farewell to the rabbi. Official reports talked of 700,000 to 800,000 mourners on the streets of Jerusalem. However, Israeli TV guesstimated over 1.5 million mourners. The police was forced to block a wide area in Jerusalem and eventually blocked all entrance to the capital to avoid losing control of the situation.
Hide, them crazy murderers would never run from inside. You try to keep me down cause you see not joy. All them knows them from, so you call them man a boy. You not I can just see, open up your eyes.
The thing that makes Judaism dangerous to
everybody, to every race, to every nation, to every idea, is that we smash things that aren't true. We don't believe in the boundaries of nation state. We don't believe in the ideas of these individual gods that protect individual groups of people. These are all artificial constructions, and Judaism really teaches us how to see that. In a sense, our detractors have us right, in that we are a corrosive force. We're breaking down the false gods of all nations and all people because they're not real. And that's very upsetting to people.
Who inspires it?